Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and as always, thank you for holding such a thoughtful hearing and having such a great panel. I consider it an enormous privilege to be on this committee, and I think this committee functions so much better than so many committees in the Senate, partly because of your leadership, partly because of our membership, and I am hopeful that we're going to come together and figure out a better way through on this budget than what's been presented from the administration. I mean, you add up the cuts to the Farm Bill with the cuts to the Department of Agriculture, we're well over 20% of the Department of Agriculture, and that I view that as an attack on rural Colorado and on rural America. And it's, when you talk about almost a fifth of the workforce, and places like Sherrod Brown mentioned it, but the Akron research station on the eastern plains of Colorado that's been so critical to developing innovations with respect to wheat over decades and decades and decades. To think about that going away is just a vital part of who we are as Colorado. So I'm glad to be on this committee, and I know this is a place where we are going to, be able to resist. I wanted to ask Dr. Johansen a question about immigration, which I think has not yet come up today in this hearing. On top of the already horrific economic conditions in farm country, our producers in Colorado counties continue to lack a stable and qualified workforce. Just last week, I heard from a friend of mine who said that he had to disc up his cabbage because he's got nobody to harvest it. He doesn't have the workforce that he needs. We addressed farm labor 4 years ago in the Senate through a compromise bill. I was part of the Gang of Eight that wrote the immigration bill here in the Senate, which got 68 votes. Both growers all across the country and the farm workers supported it as the first ag jobs bill where that's been true. But the House never took it up. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how our inability to actually tackle immigration reform is affecting the rural economy and our agricultural workforce.
Well, it's certainly an issue that producers bring up frequently, in addition to trade, as being an important component of what producers are hoping that get expanded in the new administration. They also are looking to see improvements in the stability of the ag labor workforce, and some, as you mentioned, commodities like specialty crops, vegetables, fruit and nut out west, as well as in your state, are a much larger percentage of the cost of production as compared to row crop farming in the Midwest. Not to say that labor isn't an issue there as well, but certainly a lot of the ag production that we're seeing coming out in the specialty crop area has been improving. It's almost a third of our export sales right now. It's a very important part of the ag economy, and labor is crucially important to that sector. So I know that the Secretary is committed to looking at this issue, and he's hired some expertise to help shepherd some proposals when they come around, and he's going to be looking at
Great. That. I hope he'll take a look at the work we did in the Gang of Eight bill. I think there'd be some useful things for him to consider there. My other question actually was about trade, and I know you've touched on that also today. One way to support farming and ranching communities in Colorado in this difficult economy is to make sure we've got markets for our products, and this means creating new opportunities in Cuba and China and other places as well. We also need to protect access to the critical Canadian and Mexican markets. We hear about this all the time. I hear about it in Colorado all the time, from wheat growers on the Eastern Plains, potato producers in the San Luis Valley, cattlemen on the Western Slope. I wonder, in light of the administration's recent notice of its intent to renegotiate NAFTA, what advice you would give to the U.S. Trade Representative and members of this committee about how we should proceed. And I'd be happy to have anybody answer that question.
I'll just say a couple words and then let other folks chime in. But certainly we know that trade with our NAFTA partners is very important. They're the number 2 and number 3, respectively, destination markets for U.S. ag products. Certainly there's room for improvement, and I think that's what the administration's committed to trying to find. Not only on agriculture, but for other sectors as well. I think our job at the department, and certainly your jobs, obviously across as representatives of your states, is to just highlight the importance that trade is for agriculture, and I think that that's what we're focused on doing, just to point out, while some sectors may not have the same, I guess, retrospective return on trade, but agriculture has hands down been benefited from improved trade access.
That's absolutely true.
Could I add to that, that not only is trade demand important, but also the capacity to deliver the product to the markets. And so I would reinforce the notion that we need a strong infrastructure in rural communities to actually deliver on the trade.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.